just wanted to do, like a quick touch basis, see what we're all doing, what's going on. So today, basically, I am just going to be going over how to write a proper introduction and conclusion. I am also going to be going over the sample of the anecdotal speech outline that I have provided for you all online. Quick announcement before we get started with anything. Your anecdotal speech is due this upcoming week. So this past week, you had to submit your topic approval for the anecdotal speech. You have until 11:59 p.m. tonight to submit the topic approval for your anecdotal speech. So I highly encourage you all to submit. The sooner you submit it, the better it is. Also, you want to make sure that you get full credit on that. I will be going over all of your topic approvals sometime this weekend, the latest on Monday, so you can all get started filming your speech. You will be filming your speech the same way that you did with your first speech, which was your check-in speech, which is through Flipgrid. The only difference between the first check-in speech and this speech is that this speech actually requires you to submit an outline to get your topic approved, and the length of time of the speech is a little bit longer. Our first speech was between 1 and 2 minutes for the check-in. This one is 3 to 4 minutes, meaning that a minimum of 3, a maximum of 4 minutes. So let me quickly just kind of like go over how to write an introduction and a conclusion, and then we can just quickly go over into the the outline, and then after that, we are free to go. So it's going to be a very short lesson today. I just want us to make sure that we are on the right track, that we know how to write an introduction and conclusion. Last week we talked about outlining, and I also want you all to have a good idea on how to write that speech that is required of you all. So let me quickly share the screen. Let me quickly share the screen with you all so that I can actually show you the introduction and conclusion, the little lesson that I have on that today. So again, just quick reminder, don't forget to submit your stuff by tonight at 11:59 p.m. You want to make sure that you are submitting everything in a timely manner, because I don't want you to lose any points for not submitting your material in a timely manner. So let's get started. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about, like I said, I wanted to talk about introductions and conclusions. So I did like a little mini outline over here just to kind of like talk about that mini PowerPoint. So the first thing that I wanted to say is that I don't know about you all, but one of the things that we talk about in communication studies is that introductions are everything. Once you you introduce yourself to a person, and those first 15 to 20 seconds, the person has an idea of who you are. They draw conclusions based on like how you talk, who you are, and all of that. So that's like basically what you do. So it is important in an introduction to make sure that you set a good pace for your speech, so when your audience hears your introduction, they're quickly engaged, they trust you, and they are willing to stick around for the entire speech to listen. So crafting a good introduction is really good. I also wanted to mention that your introduction should be really short. So your introduction should not take more than 10 to 15% of the length of your speech. So about 20 to 30 seconds, depending on how long your speech is. So it should be short and sweet. It should get straight to the point. The largest amount of time of your speech, you're going to be spending it on your body paragraphs, so your main points. And your introduction should be just short and sweet, get us hooked, get us to want to listen to more, and then you can give us all that information in the body paragraphs. So I had a video over here, but so basically, when it comes to the movie Mean Girls, there is a section in there that kind of like introduces that you're introducing somebody to like the Mean Girls, and the way that you introduce somebody to in that movie, the example, the way that they are introduced to the Mean Girls changes the mind of the main character. So let me quickly show you that video.
Every time I eat stuffed crust from Pizza Hut, I play this song. But watch what happens when I play it. Of all that is holy, would you look at Karen Smith's gym clothes?
Of course, all the plastics are in the same gym class. Where are the plastics?
If North Shore was Us Weekly, they would always be on the cover.
That one there, that's Karen Smith. She is one of the dumbest girls you will ever meet. Damien sat next to her in English last year.
She asked me how to spell orange.
That little one, that's Gretchen Wieners.
She's totally rich because her dad invented toaster strudel.
Gretchen Wieners knows everybody's business. She knows everything about everyone.
That's why her hair is so big. It's full of secrets.
And evil takes a human form in Regina George. Wonderful. Because she may seem like your typical selfish, backstabbing, slut-faced hoe bag, but in reality, she is so much more than that.
She's the queen bee.
So as you can see from that little video that I showed you on YouTube, you know, like the Lindsay Lohan character's friends were introducing her to the Mean Girls, just kind of like demonstrated. Basically, it set the standard for, you know, like it set the standard for like what the Lindsay Lohan character thought about the girls throughout the entire film. So I just wanted to use this as an example just to show you that introductions are everything. So when we want to set an introduction for a speech, we want to make sure that it sets the right mood, it sets the right idea, and that our audience gets engaged and gets hooked into our speech. So there are different purposes to the introduction. The first purpose of an introduction is to get the audience's attention, meaning that the first thing that you want to do is you want to get the audience hooked. And the way that you do this is by using what we call attention grabbers. So there are different ways to get the audience's attention. You can start with like a startling fact or shock the audience. In the past, I've had students who literally, like I had a student who was delivering a speech about heart disease and cut a bunch of like little hearts on white pieces of paper, like regular printing paper. And then she cut 6 hearts in red construction paper, and she put them randomly on different desks. And the way that she opened her speech was saying the people who have a red heart on their desk are the people that are going to get a heart attack. That's the percentage of people who get a heart attack. And that in itself was a really shocking attention grabber that got the entire audience to want to sit through and listen to the entire speech. So that's one way that you can do that. The other thing that you can do it is involving the audience. This could be through a demonstration or a rhetorical question. You can ask the audience to raise their hand, how many of them like In and Out, or you can say, would somebody tell me what their favorite color is? And that's how you engage them in the speech, by involving them. The next, like I said, the next thing that you can do is asking rhetorical questions. A rhetorical question is a question that doesn't expect an actual verbal answer. So you can say, have any of you thought about aliens being real? That's a rhetorical question. You don't have to have anybody in the audience directly respond to you. Next, you can start with a quote. For this particular speech that you're doing right now, which is the anecdotal speech, your attention grabber is required to be a quote. And a quote doesn't necessarily have to be a direct quote that particularly applies to the story that you're telling us. It can just be any quote that somehow fits the theme of the story. So a famous quote that I've seen a lot of students use quite often when it comes to their speeches is the one from Forrest Gump: life is like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're going to get. Again, that quote can fit any speech about anything because it is so broad. So the quote that you use can be any quote. It doesn't matter if it's not specifically about the time that you got lost in Six Flags. If it fits the theme of your story, then that's a perfect quote. You can use humor. You can start your speech with a joke. People react really well to humor. It gets them into a good mood and a good set of like mindset, and then they're willing to listen. Also, you can start with a story. This works really well with persuasive speeches. I had students who were talking about donating organs, and then they start with a very compelling story about somebody who needed an organ donation, and like, you know, they were saved by somebody's donation of like their organs. So again, depending on what type of speech you're trying to build, what type of like mood you're trying to set in your speech, you can use any of these attention grabbers. It is important that you use any of this attention grabbers rather than starting like, so like my speech is about this, because again, that first impression, that first moment, if you just like directly jump and start talking into your speech, you're not getting us in the right mindset. You're not making a good impression about just like getting us interested, getting enthusiastic, or getting in the right mindset. You have to make sure that you use an attention grabber. So one of the advices that I like to give to you all is the first thing that should come out of your mouth when you're starting to film your speech video, it should be an attention grabber. You shouldn't be telling us your name, the topic of your speech, or anything like that. The first thing that you should do when your time starts, when you're filming your video, is start with your attention grabber. That should be the first thing that comes out of your mouth. The next thing that you have to do, not necessarily for the anecdotal speech, because it would be kind of weird that you have to establish credibility when the story that you're telling us is about your own life. So for this speech, you're not required to have a credibility statement, but for future speeches, you will. So when you are building credibility, it's specifically important in your informative and persuasive speeches, because you want to make sure that you demonstrate to the audience why you're qualified to talk to us about a topic. You want to make sure that we trust you enough to trust that the information that you are providing us is legitimate. So different ways that you can say your credibility statement can be like, I play basketball, so I can tell you about the injuries that you get in basketball, or I spent a lot of time researching the topic, so I feel qualified to talk to you all about this topic. Any of those statements are great for credibility statements. So I think just make sure that you have some type of statement letting the audience know why you're qualified to speak about the topic. And again, a lot of you will be wondering, well, I don't have no expertise. You don't have to have any type of expertise. You just have to let us know why you know more information than we do on this particular topic. The next thing that you're going to have is previewing your speech ideas, letting us know what are the main points that are going to come next. So you want to make sure, so like the first thing that you should have in your introduction is your attention grabber. Then you should have your your introduction to the topic and your credibility statement. Those two you can switch around. Your credibility can come before you introduce your topic, and I'll show you what that looks like in the actual outline sample that I have on mine. But you have to let us know what your topic is. You have to have an attention grabber. You have to tell us why you're qualified. And then you have to tell us what are the main points that you're going to be discussing in your speech. So in this particular speech, which is the anecdotal speech, you're going to be telling us, I'm going to tell you the story about the time that I got lost in Six Flags. First, I'm going to tell you how I ended up at Six Flags. Then I'm going to tell you how I got lost. And finally, I'm going to tell you what I learned from the experience. So right there, you are telling us the main points that you're going to be covering and in the order that you will be covering them in, which is extremely important. So that's what your introduction should have. Again, very short and sweet. Your introduction only has 4 parts: your attention grabber, credibility statement, your specific purpose, which is you introducing us to our topic, and finally the preview of main points in the order that those main points will be discussed. You have to make sure that you have them in that particular order, because if you start with your preview of main points and you end with your attention grabber, your speech doesn't make any sense. The only 2 parts that you can switch around the order are the credibility and the introduction of your topic. Although I highly encourage you all that when you are doing your introduction, after your attention grabber, you quickly introduce us to the topic of your speech. There's nothing more frustrated than like attending a lecture or a lesson and hearing the person talk on and on, and having no idea what specifically they are talking about or what's the topic of the lecture. So say your attention grabber, quickly jump into what the topic is, then establish your credibility, and then tell us what are the main points that you're going to cover through the rest of the speech. Again, I wanted to remind you all, and I wanted to reiterate the fact that in your anecdotal speech, you do not need a credibility statement. It will be awkward to say that you're credible to tell us a story because it happened to you. As you can tell, even as I am saying it right now, it sounds a bit awkward. So you don't have to have a credibility statement in your anecdotal speech, but for your informative and persuasive, you absolutely need a credibility statement. So now that we talked about the introduction of our speech and creating the introduction, let's talk about conclusion. Now, one of the things that is really important for us as humans is we like things wrapped up really nicely at the very end. We like to make sure that we know when things are beginning, when we're in the middle, and when we're in the end. We like order. We like everything wrapped up and to be cohesive. And that's the purpose of having a conclusion. We want to make sure that we are telling our audience, we are ending the speech. This is what we touched on. This is what we want you to remember for, you know, after you leave this classroom or after you watch my video, this is what I want you to remember. So again, and just like your introduction, it varies between 5 to 15% of your speech. It should be very short and sweet. Depending on the time, like I said, for the introduction, it varies from anything from like 15 to 30 seconds, depending on how much time you have allotted for that particular speech. You want to make sure that you let the audience know that the speech is coming to an end. There's nothing more frustrating than like ending abruptly. I don't know about you all, but when I go to the movie theater and I'm watching, like, for example, a horror film, and if the horror film just ends in a cliffhanger, there's nothing more frustrating to me than that, because I want to see how things end, how things are wrapping up really nicely. And we want to make sure that we leave our audience not with that cliffhanger type of experience, but we want to make sure that we leave them with like a cohesive experience, that everything is wrapped up nicely for them. So you want to make sure that you are letting them know that the speech is coming to an end. You have to make sure that you go over your topic / specific purpose, and that you also go over the preview of main points. And you want to make sure that you end your speech with something that motivates the audience, whether it be asking them to do something or leaving them with a final quote, a final rhetorical question to think about. You can use any of the attention grabbers that we talked about for your introduction, for opening the speech. You can use any of those to close your speech. So any rhetorical question, demonstration, joke, quote, participation from the audience, startling fact, you can use any of those methods that you use as an attention grabber. You can use them as a closing statement. So again, just to review, in your conclusion, you should review your main points, review the specific purpose or topic of your speech, and finally end up with a closing statement that can be any of the same that you use as attention grabbers. The only time that you are asking us for a call to action or to do something, it should be for your persuasive speech. In your informative speech, you cannot really ask us to do something, because that already will make your speech biased. So calls to action only work well for persuasive speech, asking us to do something. So for your anecdotal and your informative, just like stick to like demonstration, rhetorical questions, quote, jokes, any of those things. So again, another thing that I want to reiterate when it comes to your conclusion, when you get to your conclusion, just summarize, just wrap everything up really nicely. Do not bring any new information, do not bring up any new ideas, and also do not drag your conclusion on and on and on. Make it short and sweet and nicely. Do not drag it on and on. There's nothing more frustrating than expecting you to come to an end, that you telling us that you're going to end your speech and then you keep on talking for about 2 other minutes. That is extremely frustrating for your audience. So hopefully this made sense to you all. If you have any questions on how to write an introduction or a conclusion, I did have like the module when we did the outlining. I did explain to you the parts of the introduction and the conclusion, and I explained to you how to write them. And again, I highly recommend you all to rewatch that video that I did on Outlining 101. It will highly help you to understand how to outline your speech, how to make sure that you are organizing in a way that it's going to be conducive to a good delivery, to an engaging delivery. The last thing that I wanted to talk about today before I let you go is I wanted us to go over what the sample outline of your anecdotal speech looks like. I know a lot of you were wondering where to find the sample. So I wanted to quickly go over that, show you what it looks like, and just kind of like break it down. The outline that I'm going to show you right now is an outline that I actually wrote for a class that I taught a few years back when I was in graduate school, like about 7 years ago. I wrote it for a class that I taught, and it's basically exactly how an anecdotal speech should look like. It was used as a sample for the class to follow. So let me quickly show you what that looks like, and let me just go over the different parts that are there and just how to like better write your speech. So I'm sharing the screen with you all. So if you go to week 3, the anecdotal speech guidelines and topic approval, underneath the topic approval discussion post, you will see something that's called the sample anecdote speech. That's when you can that's where you can find your sample anecdotal speech outline. So you go over here, you click on it, and you should be able to take a good look at it. So again, this is a speech that I wrote for a class that I taught about 7 or 8 years ago. And this is an experience that actually did happen to me. I did end up going to school in England from 6th to 7th grade. I do have family that lives over there, so it's an experience that it's an anecdotal experience of my part, and it kind of like demonstrates what I learned. So as you can see in the introduction, I have a clear attention grabber. So I have a quote, "Life is full of surprises," right? And then I interpret the quote in my attention grabber. Then it is followed by what I'm going to talk about today. So my specific purpose today, I will tell you a story of me attending school in England and what I learned. Boom, excellent specific purpose. And then next, it's followed by how the order that I'm going to tell you the story in. So the first part is I'm going to tell you how I ended up in England, then what was the first day of school, and then what I learned. And then if you notice, that's the order that the main points follow: how I ended up in school in England, how the first day went, what I learned. Then I have a transition. Remember last week I talked about how for every different section of your speech, you need to have a transition. When you go from your introduction to your body paragraph, you need to have a transition. When you switch from one body paragraph to the next, you have to have a transition. And when you go from your body to your conclusion, you have to have another transition as well. So this is a great example showing you where the transition should be placed in your outline. So I tell you, let me begin by telling you how I ended up attending school in England. Again, in the same order that I did in my preview of main points. I explained to you how I ended up in England, you know, what happened there. I have my main point, and then I have 2 subpoints supporting them. As you can see, in every single one of my subpoints that I have over here, each one of my subpoint is not more than 2 sentences long. That is the rule for outlining. If you have a subpoint that has 3 or more sentences, then it should be divided up into 1, multiple subpoints, or it should have a supporting subpoint underneath. Then I have another transition, switching into the next point, which was like, what was the first day of school like? So as you can see, now that I told you how I ended up in England, let me tell you how my first day of school was like. So again, it is a recast forecast transition, meaning that I reviewed what I just say, and then I'm previewing what's coming next. That's what your transition should be looking at. Again, they don't have to be this elaborate. So now that I discuss my first main point, let me move on to the second one. Again, it's very simple, depending on how you want to organize it. The transitions are there just to let your audience know that you just finished with this idea and you're moving on to the next one. It is really important to have them because, again, I'm the only one who gets to see your outline. I grade your outline alongside while I'm listening to your speech, so I'm the only one who gets to have this in front of you. When your classmates are watching your speech, they do not have access to your outline, so you need to clarify those transitions for them so that they know when you just finish an idea and you're moving on to the next one. So as you can see, my second main point, I said I was going to talk about what the first day of school was like. That's exactly what my second main point is about. I talk about it, and again, I have 2 subpoints, and then B needed more information. It was going to be more than 2 sentences or 1 or 2 sentences, and I did subpoints. Then I have another transition. Now that I talked about what my experience was the first day of school, let me talk about how I was experienced that I will never forget. And then I explain why it was an experience that I will never forget. Now that I have talked about why my experience was valuable, let me conclude with what we talked about today. So I tell you the topic today. I talk about what my first day of school was like. First, I told you A, B, and C in the order that I went through in the speech. Hope that my little story has shown you that life is full of surprises. I ended up with a quote and with my interpretation of it. So this is a fabulous example for you to follow, so that you can you can write your speech like that. Great example to follow. Please go ahead and look at this. Use it use it as a sample, follow it along. I also have provided you all with an outline template in our class page. I also have provided you with an outline template that does allow you to just literally download that document and then plug in. So I highly, highly, highly encourage you all to check that out whenever you are able to. So today we had a very, very short meeting. This was our meeting for today. I just kind of wanted to touch base on the speech, and I wanted to go over how to write a proper introduction and conclusion. Please do not forget that your assignments for this week, which is your discussion post for the topic approval, is due tonight at 11:59 p.m. Don't forget to submit. I'm sorry that I haven't been very timely at grading your assignments this week. My daughter has been sick and she has been staying home, so I have had a hard time catching up on grading, but I will grade them as soon as possible, and I will continue staying on a timely manner when it comes to grades. If you have any questions, shoot me an email. If you're having any trouble filming your speech on Flipgrid, or if you need me to walk you through it, remember that my office hours are on Tuesdays from 1 to 1:30 p.m. And if there are no other questions, thank you for joining me today, this Friday. I will be posting this lecture on our Canvas page sometime on Sunday, and I will try to get to grading your papers as soon as possible. I hope that you all have a fabulous weekend and take care. I'll see you next week.